So, good evening, guys. Welcome to this online OWASP Dorset event. And this is, by the way, the first one that we are hosting for 2021. And also the very first that we are streaming over our OWASP Dorset YouTube channel. So if you don't want to miss our future YouTube streams, please, register to the channel. I see that there are already some comments on the chat. All right. So today we are very happy to have with us two speakers. The first one, and I'm referring them as they are going to present today. The first is a returning speaker, Mantas Sasnauskas from Cyber News, who will describe his adventures against phishing scammers. And then after 20-25 minutes and some Q&A, we are going to have Chris Conroy from Dorset Police Cybercrime Unit. Unless Dan and Mark wants to say something, I think we should hand over to Mantas.
Just thank you everybody for joining. It's the first one of 2021 and hopefully the first of many.
All right. So I'm adding Mantas to the stream. Hello, Mantas. In a few seconds, the virtual floor will be yours. So I'm muting my microphone and we are getting out of the stream for the presentation to start. I'm starting with Mark. So I'm taking out Mark.
Can you hear me?
Dan, yes, we can hear you, Mantas. And I'm removing myself. So Mantas, over to you.
Okay, so I'll just put on the presentation on. Can anyone confirm that they can see the presentation? Hopefully everyone can see it.
We can see the presentation. Off you go.
All right. Okay, so well, as you can see on the screen, my name is Mantas. I'm a senior information security researcher at Cyber News. I probably have many interests in different domains of information security, but mostly focusing on threat hunting, cybercrime, investigating cybercrime, data leaks, hardware hacking, basically do some router hacking. I'm also interested in astrophotography. You can see my GitHub here, but I don't believe that anything much changed since last time. Yeah, so it's actually quite weird talking. It seems that I'm talking to myself when it's online and streaming on YouTube, but here we go. So this is not it, just a second. Yeah. So basically what I'm going to talk about is this interesting investigation I did on with Cyber News on this Facebook phishing scam, which wasn't even planned. Basically, I received a message from one of the colleagues sending me a Facebook message that had a like a typical phishing scam message from his friend in Germany. And apparently, few of them got them. And I mean, these messages are nothing new. They're happening for many years now. And I thought it was Sunday evening, and I thought maybe I will dig into it. Maybe I'll find something interesting. And it was interesting. It basically led me to find some breadcrumbs there, and which eventually I ended up in finding out who the actual perpetrator was. And the scale was quite big. I mean, the number of users that actually clicked there were in hundreds of thousands. And yeah, so let's go on. So this particular phishing scam is called "Is That You?" because you basically receive a message from one of your contacts masquerading as a video, and it uses Facebook's Open Graph. So basically, that embedded video and message has your name and usually your profile picture, which lures you into believing that maybe you are in that video. Click on it and see what's on that video. The script basically has tracks your location, the device that you're using, operating system, and some other things as well. And basically, it tries to harvest your credentials, which is nothing new, and like tracking the phishing page, like what it does at the end. It also tries to infect you with adware or malware. And the interesting part is that it also, like basically everyone that clicks there serves as a malicious traffic to advertising networks, which I'll talk later in other slides. So these are quite cool visuals that we did. I didn't do them. A colleague of mine did these. So basically, it just shows initially when I started investigating this, how many users actually clicked on the phishing link. And the campaign by the perpetrator started in Germany in February, on February 11th, I think, or something like that. And when I started investigating it, it was just active for, I think, 3 or 4 days. And there were already almost 400 or 500,000 users that clicked, and most of them were from Germany. So then I finished that investigation, which happened in Germany, mostly targeting Germany users. Came back to it maybe a week after and saw that it was targeting people in UK then, and in 3 days it targeted more than 17,000 users, but I mean it was much more, but 17,000 users already clicked on it. Yeah, so as of now, I've checked it today, the campaign switched to Japan mostly, and it was still very active in UK. So we...
Mantas, if you don't mind me interrupting you, sorry for breaking your flow. We are wondering whether you are sharing the right window. We currently see what happened. This is the slide that we see. So if you are using presenter mode, maybe.
Yeah, I was stuck on that, right? Maybe I'll just use this, like, is it okay? Because I have like 3 screens, and if I share it, so for some reason it might be sharing a different screen, maybe. What if anyway, what if I go like that?
If you go like that, this is what we were looking at so far. So let's go with that. We see now what happened again.
What happened? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I was talking about Is That You phishing scam. So basically, it just says what I said, and then the scale is as I talked. Initially, it started in Germany with like almost 400,000 users clicking on it, then UK, and as of now, it switched to Japan mostly and UK. And when I say it switched, it's basically what I think like the perpetrator actually switches the message to a different language. So it's translated initially it was in German language, then in English, and then Japanese. And yeah, so this is a graph from an embedded, a legitimate third-party tracking service, which basically he left in his code there. So I can basically check it every day to see how it's spreading. So yeah, as I talked, this is basically the message. Maybe some of you saw it already. Maybe you received it. It uses, as I said, Facebook's Open Graph to manipulate the metadata. So it has your name, your picture, profile picture usually in the embedded video. So it uses some sort of like social engineering or to lure you into clicking it. So yeah, so then you click it, what happens is quite interesting, I think. So this particular person, he breached one of the legitimate websites and basically injected a malicious code. So Facebook has pretty rigorous system in detecting whether a link is malicious or not. So by using a legitimate website with the injected script, it basically, at least for some time, tricks Facebook into not flagging it as spam or a malicious link. So this is basically the legitimate website with an injected XML file, which is quite simple. This is not an actual link, by the way. So if you click it, it's not an actual link. XXX here is not XXX here. And the script basically is just a simple redirection script. So it redirects. So basically, when you click the link, you go into this legitimate website, and you are straight away redirected to a Facebook phishing page, which contains the malicious script. So of course, what it does at first, it tries to harvest your credentials. And by harvesting credentials, then the threat actor can basically take over other Facebook accounts, and those Facebook accounts can then send the new phishing links to their contacts. Yeah, next one. So in that Facebook phishing link, you have different scripts that not only harvest credentials, but basically it also to harvest your location data, what device you're using, your browser, your operating system, some other stuff. And what was interesting is that there was this script who's Among Us, which is a legitimate tracking service. So basically, the threat actor not only wanted to track like what device you're using, but he wanted to see how many people actually click on the link. And basically, anyone that found that phishing page and inspected the source code could go take the tracking number and identifier and basically log into that to his account on that tracking service and see all of the statistics there. So there was some statistics that I gathered. So basically, like what browsers mostly people that click used, and operating systems which correlates with the browser. Mostly it was Chrome and Safari on iPhone. Chrome was I think on Android phones. So yeah, Android and iOS, mostly mobile users. So looking further into that source code of the phishing page, there were some scripts that linked to the threat actor's command and control server. So basically, he used several servers and his own DNS server, and he had his signature there all over, which was bendercrack.com, which was very interesting. And this was the first artifact of a language he uses, which was Spanish. I'm not very good in Spanish. Desrolado por, which is developed by. Yeah, and basically, I mean, then I started Googling who's Bendercrack, and found some interesting things, which I'll go on the other slides. So on the logging into that third party, which is legitimate third party tracking service, I could see that there are different campaigns with different names. So Black Sar, Tamo Trabajando, and La Parita, which were also Spanish words. And I started looking into where they link and what they track. I've also did some like OSINT and some other investigations into like other domains that use that person has, and basically all of them had like Blacksar or Blacksar DNS, for example. .me is, I think he's still using it for his DNS server. I did some more investigation into his server that he uses, which was quite interesting because I cannot share all the data here, of course, but basically he used his service for malicious activities as well for his personal activities, and his server contained the user harvested credentials, all the location data, other stuff, as well as his children pictures and family photos. He also had a Facebook page where he sold his services to other people, which is, by the way, now being taken off Facebook, and the page no longer exists as of, I think, last week when I checked it. But it was, yeah, quite interesting to chat with him. So then the first article about the campaign was released. There was this group of people who contacted me, and apparently they were tracking the same person with the same phishing scam campaign, and gave some more information. Basically, they talked with the guy. And as you can see here, for example, there was message like what the motive was of the threat actor to launch this campaign, and how the money was earned. So I've also found these scripts in the phishing page, which after you enter your credentials, redirects you to a advertising network, so basically an ad network that sells ads, and this phishing campaign basically serves that ad network malicious or traffic in there. And the person himself said that this is anecdotal, so it's not a fact, but this is anecdotal. So basically, he said that from I think every 1,000 visitors from US, for example, he earns $150, which can be true and can be correlated with that, but yeah, it's his words. The ad network apparently is a legitimate network, which is ads leading, called ads leading. And an interesting fact was that that ad network is located in Dominican Republic. The threat actor lives in Dominican Republic as well. And I cannot share all the data again, but from what I found in my investigation, there is a lot of correlation between these ad networks using malicious traffic to earn their money and serve ads, as well as a good source of income for the perpetrators. Yeah, and basically when your credentials are harvested, your data is harvested, you are being led to an ad network which serves you malicious ads. And it depends on what device you're using. It might be that you end up with just ads, or just a request to install a Flash player or whatever, an update, which basically is just malware, and usually it's adware. So this is almost the end, and the most interesting part. Unfortunately, I cannot share the guy's Facebook page or what his name or whatever. But yeah, so what led me to the personal page of that threat actor was that La Parita, one of the campaigns on the third-party tracking service, was that he probably used one of the tracking codes for his personal Facebook page, and yeah, and basically it had a link there, and the guy was in Dominican Republic, and all the domains, by the way, were registered in Dominican Republic as well, and everything pointed to the same person, and everything pointed to the Dominican Republic. So what I did at the end is, of course, reported it to the Dominican CERT, to Germany's CERT, to UK's CERT, and yeah, and apparently Germany's and the UK's CERT, they responded that they're investigating it. Dominican Republic CERT did not respond it. And I cannot share more screenshots, but basically there was a conversation with the guy, and he said it's very common that in that country, a lot of people that are unemployed and are a little bit more tech savvy, they earn their income. It's not like saying that everyone does that, but it's quite popular there to do that and to earn some extra income, or maybe main income. So yeah, that is all my talk. If you have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer them. Anyone? Oh, I can see some questions on YouTube.
There are some questions. Mostly the ones I see is for the slides. There's one. So how long did this investigation take? And I'm adding Mark and Dan to the stream as well.
Yeah, so investigation, it wasn't that hard. I mean, so I received the message and I didn't plan on doing anything. As I said, it was Sunday evening, and I spent the whole night looking into it. And I had basically everything on Monday morning, and then just coming back to the tracking service, did some OSINT on Monday. So I don't know, maybe like 2 days or so. I mean, it's nothing too complex or anything. It's just that it takes some time to probably correlate all the evidence you have, and to yeah, get the picture what's happening. There's a question about XML script. Oh, I see there's a question, what tools did I use to track all that info? Not many. So the main one is probably browser, inspect source code, and I used VirusTotal for checking the command control server and finding out other servers. Then I used some reverse DNS online tools to find the DNS server. Yeah, so basically code inspector, VirusTotal, and Whois tools. some more
Got
questions.
some more questions.
Yeah.
More questions are about the tools and the methods for the investigation.
So, is there any specific methods you adopt for these investigations, like tools or just codes? So yeah, as I said, it's just basically these basic tools and nothing more. I mean, I can just say that this person that did this did not try to hide anything he was doing. I mean, even like his, he hosted his personal photos on his server where he harvested all the credentials and did malicious things. So, yeah. And also, yeah, one interesting thing, but I mean, I cannot share this here with like screenshots or anything, but the UK cert has all the information. But basically, his personal server had a simple authentication, which was very easy to bypass and to, very easy to bypass. The embedded video contains personal info of the profile, which is already public. Can it happen to people having locked Facebook profile? The embedded video contains personal info of the profile, which is already public. I mean, if your Facebook account is locked, then you cannot go into your messages, I believe. I don't know. But I mean, the message itself, so the script of the message contains Facebook Open Graph, where you have metadata, and it just uses that for the message. So when you receive the message, you have your name and your usually profile picture in the message, which is taken from your profile. Okay, in my opinion, which type of attacks are more effective out of rated top 10 vulnerabilities of OWASP? Most effective, I don't know. I mean, this is just a scam. I mean, but which ones are more effective? I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean,
maybe is there any OWASP top 10 vulnerability that has been exploited in this incident? Maybe this is something that we could.
I mean, this vulnerability basically exploits people. You know, as someone said on the internet, click share, get hit. It's simple as that. So it's not like this attack exploits any vulnerability on your device because basically you are clicking on the link. It just maybe exploits the way that Facebook is flagging malicious links. So by using a legitimate website with injected code and maybe there's, but I mean, I don't know how the website was breached, so it might have used a outdated WordPress CMS or something. It's hard to say because when I reported it to that service that the website was hosted, it was mitigated in, I don't know, like a couple hours. And I didn't check for vulnerabilities on that website as I didn't have I couldn't check it for legal reasons. How much of this campaign was based on steganography? None.
I think the one comment that I have just put on the stream is interesting. It's actually something I want to ask about the capability of the threat actor.
Yeah. So, what was the general quality of the code like? Was this someone who know what they're doing, or just taking anything they could find online together on it? Yeah. So I think so. The code quality was poor. He didn't try to obfuscate anything, and it seemed like the code was put together from like already written code by someone else, and everything was just put together. So it seemed like everything was just copy pasted, and that's it. So I think the person himself is not a very good programmer. or I mean, yeah, it's just kind of like a sloppy job he did, which was quite easy to hide most of his activities, or I mean, at least some of the things that would not lead to him directly or his other pages. Yeah, there's a good observation by Robert Dixon that said not a question, but short URL services are really common with these types of similar types of phishing attacks, which is, yes, they are very commonly used. But even if you use a short URL service, Facebook would have flagged it. So what the perpetrator did is he used a legitimate hacked or breached site with a injected code that redirected you to a short URL website, and then that one would redirect you to a phishing page. So there are like 2 steps until you are redirected to the phishing page. Yeah, poor guy, he just wanted to earn some money. Yeah, he's still earning his money. I mean, he's still active. Also, it's good to see social media websites are taking action against this by using location device checking at login and 2-factor authentication. Yes, so very good point, worth mentioning. All of the accounts that had 2-factor authentication, I mean, they wouldn't be breached even if their credentials are harvested. So yeah, that's a very good point. The only accounts that didn't have the 2-factor authentication.
All right. I think, Mantas, you handed over the comments very well. You were doing both, answering and finding the comments. So,
Yeah.
I mean, let's take the question from Anosi as the last one. So, what's the best way to avoid falling for such a phishing scam in the future? And then let's give the virtual floor to Chris.
Yeah. So good question. I mean, there's no like proof method. It's just basically, I mean, these messages, they look like they are phishing, like phishing links. I mean, a video asking whether it's you. It's it smells like a phishing link, and they usually employ some sort of a simple social engineering technique. So like asking open questions, or is this you, and looking for grammar mistakes, which I think this message had as well, basically leaving a space between a word and an exclamation or question mark, and so on. Also using 2-factor or multi-factor authentication, which makes credential harvesting redundant, and yeah, and I mean, being mindful on any suspicious activity on your accounts, and using password managers. But I mean, it wouldn't help probably on if you click on the link itself.
All right. Mantas, thank you very much for the presentation. You have our virtual claps, okay?
Thank you.
And mine.
Thank you, Mantas. That's good.
I just wanted to point out, it's really weird when you're talking, and it seems that you're talking to yourself. Like, I mean, like when you're alone presenting, you just see your slides and that's it. But yeah, it's a good experience.
Tell me about it. I do this
Okay,
every
thanks.
week. Right. Okay. Thank you, Mantas. I'm
Thanks.
taking you out of the. You removed your screen. I'm removing you from the stream as well. So let's now continue with the second part of the meetup, and let's welcome again Chris. All right. So Chris, please share your screen, and I will add it to the stream, and then we can disappear, and the floor is yours. You know that I keep saying that. My supervisor used to say this one. It's his fault. All right, so I see the screen. Okay.
There we go.
Okay, Chris, over to you then.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. My name's Chris Conroy. I'm the Cyber Protect and Prevent Officer for Dorset Police. My job basically is to go around and speak to people, businesses, small to medium enterprises mostly, community groups, charities, NHS, MOD, basically anyone who wants some sort of cybersecurity advice, cyber awareness sessions, and things like that. Obviously, things have been a little bit more tricky this year with COVID and things. Obviously, not able to get into businesses and conferences and things like that quite so easy. So started to sort of get a little bit more adept at talking online. I can echo Mantis's sentiment. So it's very weird talking to what seems to be yourself the whole way through. A little bit about me though, I suppose. So I've been with Dorset Police now 6.5 years or thereabouts. And I started off in our control room, so answering 101 and 999 calls. Did that for a couple of years, and then stepped up to radio dispatch, so sending officers to jobs, just running pursuits, keeping a lid on things, or doing our best to at the very least. After about 4 years, probably 3.5, 4 years in the control room, an opportunity came up in our intelligence bureau. So I took that up, and it was a lifetime intel job, basically doing research on nominals, people that came up in jobs, people that we're looking for, missing people, all sorts really, mostly closed source work, sort of stuff that we've got on our own systems, but an element of open source as well. And that's really where my interest in this sort of world came from, I suppose. The opportunity to learn about sort of open source intelligence and all that was really interesting, and it grew from there. So relatively proficient at that, and then this job came up. My predecessor obviously moved on to private sector, and then this job came up and jumped at the chance, and I haven't looked back, to be honest. I really enjoy what I'm doing at the moment. I'm not going to kid anyone here, to be honest. Your knowledge by far probably outstrips mine when it comes to cyber awareness, cyber security, and all that sort of stuff. And there's going to be very little that I think I could teach anyone here at all about how to stay safe online. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to talk about the structure of what we do, a little bit about how we do it. For obvious reasons, obviously some of the stuff that you probably want to hear about is operationally sensitive, and I'm not really going to be able to go into a huge amount of detail about it. So what I'm going to do instead, I'll go through a couple of slides and talk about the various elements of the job. And I'm going to open it up to questions. And obviously, if there are any that I can answer without giving away stuff that I'll get fired for, bearing in mind this is being recorded to stay on the internet in perpetuity. Well, that's a mistake there straight away for the internet. Perpetuity. That's the word I was looking for. Obviously, be a bit mindful about the answers I give, but I'll do my best to make sure nobody leaves too disappointed. So start off by talking about some of the statistics. These are taken from the Crime Survey for England and Wales, and this is the year ending March 2020. So if we take this top section here, violent crime, robbery, theft, vehicle-related thefts, burglaries, and bike thefts. In that 1 year period, across the UK, 5,661,000 people reported falling victim to that sort of crime. If we look at fraud and Computer Misuse Act offences, so 3,675,000 fraud and 876,000 CMA offences. Now that alone, as to what I think people who don't necessarily know a great deal about security, safety, and all that would probably consider, particularly CMA, to be a very narrow bracket of what we deal with. But as you can see, obviously, that's 44.5% it works out of the crime that's reported in the UK nowadays. Huge problem, absolutely huge problem. Just to touch back onto Mantis's presentation, this scam, the Is This You one, obviously very recent, the sort of unearthed thing did the rounds in Germany. It's obviously come to the UK now as well. We've had reports of that in Dorset now. I think, to be honest, probably still down in single figures. And when you look at, 17,000, I think it was, 17,000 clicks on that link within a few days. It really goes to show the element of underreporting that we have when it comes to cybercrime as well. and that's problematic. Now, I think the crime survey for England and Wales gives us a pretty good reflection of what the state of play really is, because people are just, you fill that out, sort it, and it's done. A lot of the time, people don't want to make that report to the police. It's either they feel embarrassed, they maybe don't feel like anything's going to happen with it. Any number of reasons why people don't. And like I say, for us, it's an issue because we can only try and help people when we know about it. And those reports going into action fraud, they really help because they inform the picture of what we're doing. They get the attention of the government, and obviously things pointing in the right direction when it comes to money, which I think everyone will probably understand is really what makes things happen an awful lot of the time. Chronic underreporting really, and obviously we're really trying to work on a way that we can get that resolved. There are some things that the NCSC and the government have come out with in the last few months which have really made a difference in that. So reporting phishing emails is easier than ever with the suspicious email reporting service. Hopefully some of you have heard of that. Obviously reporting a phishing email used to be a case of going onto the Action Fraud website, filling out a form, sticking in a screen grab, doing all this sort of arduous stuff that, if your browser crashes halfway through, you're not going to go back and start again. So an awful lot of the time people just wouldn't. With SIRS, or the Suspicious Email Reporting Service, it's just a case of forwarding a dodgy email now. Forward it to report@phishing.gov.uk. Bam, done. And there's a system in the background that works away, analyzes a domain, and obviously then from that point, if it looks dodgy, people start making requests of sort of service providers, seeing if we can get those domains removed from the internet, and makes a real difference. Anything we can do that's going to make reporting easier for people, I think, is really going to start impacting the figures that we see being reported. Moving on anyway to sort of the financial aspects of this. Now, this is slightly older. I tried to get the most up-to-date figures today, and the NFIB, National Fraud Intelligence Bureau, they have a really good interactive dashboard. So this dashboard will show you crime. So it'll break it down into specific types of fraud or specific types of cybercrime. And you can see the financial cost of cardholder not present fraud, for example, and things like that. For some reason today, it just didn't want to work. I could tell you how many reports there have been in 2020 and so far in 2021. Oh, I couldn't tell you how much it cost. So I thought this would be a little bit better to show you, a bit more impactful. So this is the period of April 2018 into March 2019, so a whole year. And this is just Dorset, reports just from Dorset. So of fraud, reports of fraud, 5,943. And that added up to a whopping £16.5 million worth of financial loss to individuals and companies in Dorset. 750,000 people-ish in Dorset. I mean, that's per capita, quite a big chunk of money. And you might wonder why I'm talking about fraud so much. Just look down the bottom of this here, we've got this figure 80%. So that is basically the proportion of fraud that's reported to Action Fraud that has an element of cyber in it. So phishing emails and things like that, for example, that will go under fraud rather than cybercrime. So we class these crimes in two different ways. We've got cyber enabled, which is phishing emails and all that sort of stuff, and then cyber dependent, which is malware, ransomwares, and all that sort of stuff. So pure cyber is cyber dependent, and then anything that's just enhanced by the use of a computer, so your scams, goes under cyber enabled or fraud. You can see here as well, relatively even split. So the line in the middle with that little sort of circle and an arrow there, 46% of the victims of fraud were businesses, 54% were individuals. I think that's relatively in line with national trends in that regard. So we have a look at the cost impact of pure cybercrime. Obviously 270 in a year seems like a relatively small figure, but you think that's a successful cyber attack almost, I know I can't do maths, it's late, it's been a long day, but 270 in a year, that's a fair amount. Still £343,000 as well. I'm just going to have to make this a little bit bigger because even I can't see these figures down here now. Over to the right here in this one, by volume, it's roughly £8,000 of loss for businesses, and the biggest type was social media hacking or account takeovers. So one of the biggest crime types we have for organizations and businesses at the moment, a great deal of business email compromise. Again, hopefully it's something you guys will probably be familiar with, but if you're not, the premise of that is basically phishing, trying to compromise somebody's corporate email. And from there you can start sending out amended invoices, which is what typically happens, or you can intercept sort of transactions and conversations. So solicitors firms really hard hit with stuff like this. Architects, even anyone that's dealing with big sums of money. And looking into these sort of scams, typically what will happen is obviously someone will sit in Office 365 or Outlook 365 rather, set up a rule. So anytime a particular word features in remittance, final bill, anything like that, that email is then diverted to the attacker who's monitoring that compromised account. From that point, they jump in obviously and say, yep, cracking, here's your invoice. And they'll just send over an invoice that they've taken from like sent boxes or something like that, with different payment details on there. And huge amounts of money go missing with stuff like that. We've had people lose sort of 300 grand from the sale of a house. Obviously they've paid a chunk of money thinking they're sending money over to a solicitor, and then bam, gone, and never to be seen again, really. Awful amount of loss to business email compromise. And yeah, it's things like solicitors firms, anyone dealing with those high net worth sort of transactions. See down the bottom, individuals, £241,000 of loss there. That is, it just says hacking personal. So again, that's going to be email accounts, social media, and all that sort of stuff. The bulk of what we deal with, I say the bulk of what we deal with, probably the most common thing that lands on our desks in our office will be someone who's lost control of an email account, social media account, something like that. We also have a great deal of sort of domestic related stuff. So obviously people who have split up and then want to keep tabs on what their ex-partner's doing. So they'll start trying to pry into their emails or their social media just to see what conversations they're having and with who. Really high volume of that sort of stuff coming through at the moment. And we also have a great deal of sort of remote, what am I trying to think of? Taking over somebody's computer, basically. So your engineer frauds, those sort of things, where Steve from BT calls sort of 5 o'clock in the evening and he tells you there's something wrong with your computer, but they can fix it if you download TeamViewer and let them take control of your machine. We have all sorts of variations of that. It's banks, service providers, all sorts really. And we've had, again, people lose hundreds of thousands of pounds in just a few clicks of their mouse because they've given access to their computer and handed basically the control of their computer over to someone with less than pure intentions. So obviously big problem. I've just realized I forgot to add at the top of this slide here. So let's just imagine that it says national structure or something like that rather than double click to edit. So in terms of the response in the UK to cybercrime, this is the loose sort of structure. So right at the very top of the tree, there's National Crime Agency who deal with the national and international enforcement, and the NCSC will deal with the technical guidance. So any of the advice that you'll get from someone in the regional cybercrime unit or from someone from Dorset Police always will be along the lines of what's given out by the NCSC. And they've got a great deal of information on there as well. You can go onto the NCSC website now, and it used to be just focusing on businesses, but it's great now. You can go on there, and there's stuff for individuals, families, sole traders, multi-medium enterprises, all the way up to multinationals and public sector bodies. If you work for an organization that maybe hasn't got a budget for security awareness training or anything like that, they've got e-learning packages that you can download freely and integrate into whatever platform you're already using. So well worth having a look at. Obviously, a lot of the time, some of the problems that we see are people maybe not taking cybersecurity seriously, which is always going to be a problem. I think that's one that we'll probably always face. So that's why they've developed a board toolkit, a couple of workshops that you can run through and things you can do to try and wake people up and make them realize how important this sort of stuff is. You can sit down with your decision makers and run through some fairly fun, some of them, sort of games and scenarios and exercises that hammer home the importance of what it is that we're doing. Then underneath the NCA, National Cybersecurity Centre, the National Police Chiefs Council set up and now head up basically Cyber Protect, which is a network of people in my position basically who go around and give out advice to people that want it. And then we've got Action Fraud and the National Fraud Intelligence Bureau as well. Now they deal with strategic oversight around messaging and obviously collating reports and making sure everything's disseminated accordingly. So every time somebody makes a report to Action Fraud, what will happen is it'll be sort of checked over, triaged, and if there's lines of inquiry or something that they can do with it, that'll be sent down to a regional cybercrime unit and then in turn passed on to a local force. So our stuff comes from Action Fraud to the region sends it to Dorset, and then anything with a line of inquiry or anything with safeguarding concerns and things like that will be given to either a digital media investigator or Cyber Protect officer, which is always going to be me because it's just me at Dorset. So below them, we've got the regional cybercrime unit, and again, they deal with regional investigations and enforcement, force oversight. So they have a bit of an eye on what we're doing locally, just to make sure everyone's singing from the same song sheet. They deal with Ministry of Defence, National Health Service, critical national infrastructure, and things like that as well. They've got the ability to sort of coordinate a lot better and do those big, broad projects with National Health Service and things. And then right down the bottom of the tree, you've got me. So we deal with, in our office, sort of local investigations, anything in Dorset. We benefit from really good relationships with our colleagues in Devon and Cornwall, Avon and Somerset, Gloucester, Wiltshire, in that sort of regional bubble. Thankfully as well, obviously Hampshire, just over the border to the east. They're great. Their sort of whole network of forces around the country is really good sort of cooperative working in that regard. So if there's anything where we uncover an offender, we're able to sort of pinpoint an offender's location roughly, and we know it's a bordering force or any force around the country, we can package up what we've done and obviously pass it on to people to make sure it gets picked up and dealt with there. And then obviously we've got small to medium enterprise and community group engagement, and that's really me. That's the bread and butter of my work. And it is all about the preventative sort of stuff, making sure people have a bit of an idea of the threats they face when they go online, basically. So in terms of the sort of policing's approach to cybercrime, we've adopted the sort of 4 Ps measure that counter-terrorism police use as well. So we've got protect, prepare, pursue, and prevent. Sort of protect and prepare fall very much under the same sort of work. So I've just clubbed them together on here, but we've got what we call the 4 Ps. First and foremost is pursue. So that's the investigative side of things. So in our office, we've got digital media investigators rather, and they're trained in a whole range of things, extracting data from devices, routed downloads, copying off servers, and all that sort of stuff, basically making sure we can obtain clean and evidentially sort of sound data to be able to work from. So if we have a business who's hit with a ransomware attack, for example, we've got SATA drives and readers we can go just hook up and clone hard drives, obviously making sure we're working from an untouched copy of their data, leaving their data intact. And then if we're able to find something that we can do to obviously restore their data, obviously in that we can test and try on a copy that we know isn't really going to do any harm, which is handy. In terms of our investigations and stuff as well, we're really good with the relationships that we have with all the people you probably expect us to. So it goes up regionally. So for the region, if we have any sort of international sort of things going on, we feed into the region and they'll take a hold of sort of the big sort of jobs. And then we benefit from, like I say, good relationships with telecoms providers, web hosting, and things like that. We're sort of bordering on the areas where if I give away too much, I'll probably get in trouble. So what I'll do in that regard, if there's any burning questions you have around the investigation side of things, feel free to chuck them in towards the end. I'll have a look, and if I can give you an answer, I'll do my best to. Prevent. Now, this is one of the hats that I wear. So I'm the cyber prevent Spock for Dorset Police. And again, each force has 1, maybe 2 prevent Spocks. Some have even more. And the whole idea of cyber prevent is that when we're able to pick up on, or we're made aware of a child who's got, say, a particular set of skills, and they if they don't learn how to use them for good, you know they're going to start using them for bad, basically. So it's about becoming aware, or trying to become aware of these people before they start causing problems. And at the moment, we're having a bit of a nightmare with kids obviously being at home and supposed to be working from home, obviously not necessarily working that hard. And they've realized that if they're playing something like Fortnite, they can use just a browser-based web stressor tool to knock their friends off of their games. And then they've also realized if they can do it to a friend, they could probably do it to the school. And if they can do it to the school, they can disrupt people's remote learning, things like that. It's becoming a little bit of an issue. And obviously this is perfect because it's going to give us that opportunity to get in there with some early intervention work and make sure they're aware of the implications of a conviction under the Computer Misuse Act offence, Computer Misuse Act rather. If now age, let's say, pick at random, a 12-year-old kid does something online, gets conviction under the Computer Misuse Act offence, they're probably not going to be able to travel abroad to, say they want to go to America. Boom, gone. They're not going to be able to. And it's just little bits like that, so fairly soft approach at first, just making sure people know the implications of what they're doing. It's not just fun and games, and you're not just doing it to annoy a friend. You can really cause some damage by playing around with things that you don't necessarily understand. And the good thing with it as well, at a very, very extreme end, really extreme end, there are schemes and ways that we can, through working with the region and private sector sort of partners and things like that, steering those that have really good skill sets, not your sort of script kids and all that sort of stuff, or someone who's just plugging in some data on a website. People that really know how to use their tools and dabbling and stuff. Pushing them towards things like apprenticeships so they can build their skills, but obviously know that if they go back on any promises or behavioral contracts they've made, they will be convicted and there will be an issue. But obviously, if they stick with it and really work, they can be in a relatively strong position with some pretty in-demand set of skills by the end of it. Cyber Protect. This is my bread and butter. This is what I'd normally be doing 3-4 times a week, going out and speaking to people under the sort of Cyber Protect banner. And that, again, this is engagements with SMEs, community groups, charities, education. A lot of the work we do is victim support, putting out comms. So obviously the Cyber News article came out about this Is This You thing. So we pumped out some links to the Cyber News article with a little bit of context, making sure people were aware of this before it became too big a deal. Always looking for ways that we can spread that word a little bit wider. First to admit that we use social media a great deal. So Facebook, Twitter, sometimes LinkedIn, things like that. But this is recorded, so I trust she's probably not going to watch it, but let's pick on my nan briefly. My nan doesn't use LinkedIn. She's not on Facebook. She's not on Twitter. We're missing that demographic sometimes. So it's trying to find ways to make sure we're getting the information to everyone that needs it. And that's where the community engagement, so going to community groups and sort of through charity organizations, can hopefully close that gap and make sure we're getting the information to as many people as possible and those who really need it. So this is one of the things that has come out in sort of the last year or so. This is the relaunch of Cyber Aware. So you might recall probably about 2 years, maybe 2.5 years ago now, the NCSE or the government released this campaign, and it had some sort of gangster chap, skinhead in a suit, pointing angrily at a camera. It was something Steve, his name was. And this campaign was basically about upskilling the people who need this awareness the most. So basically trying to give people some really, really easy steps with barely any barriers to it whatsoever. So people that aren't doing anything at all to look after themselves online, this is who this guidance is for. And the relaunch of it has been much more successful. I think it's a lot more appropriate tonally. A lot of it's been focusing on coronavirus, predictably, obviously, because at the start of the pandemic and obviously the whole way through this pandemic, there's been an awful lot of scams specifically focusing on COVID. Using that sort of fear that people might have about it and the social engineering tricks around that sort of stuff. To at the end of the day, it's impactful. If you see something somewhere in early days and you needed masks, well, brilliant, this place is selling masks, boom. Those tricks really worked early on. That's what this campaign was trying to address. and it's eventually slowly rather it started to shift into just broad general cybersecurity advice for the people that need it the most, basically. You can see in blue down the bottom, these are the 6 tips that people are recommending. I'd say the people NCSC are pushing out and recommending at the moment. Obviously, there are things that people could be doing that are much, much better, but bear in mind, obviously, it says about saving your passwords in your browser. Yes, there are problems with doing that, but having some really good passwords saved in your browser is better than using password 123 across the board. And that's really what this is aiming for. Those stepping stones to get people thinking and get them that next step along. Yeah, so really hopeful this campaign is going to make things a lot easier, going to make things a great deal simpler for people to help improve their sort of security posture. This website as well, ncsc.gov.uk/cyber-aware. If you click on each of these sections, it goes into step-by-step guides for putting this advice, implementing this advice rather than actually making use of it. So turning on 2-factor authentication, for example. If I had to try and explain that to somebody who had no idea, it'd be quite tricky. But there's a guide there. You can click on and say implement 2FA for Gmail. Click on that, and it gives you every step you need to take, which is great. For businesses, obviously, there's a great deal of need for further support from businesses. I touch on it down the bottom of this slide. One of the biggest problems we've had and always will have is that we have to remain impartial. It's what people would expect of the police, and it's what we have to do for obvious reasons. And that has caused a little bit of difficulty in giving some people advice. So I've spoken at conferences, or I've spoken to organisations before, and they've said, this is great. What do I do? What should I have for my firewall, for example? What do you recommend? And every single time I've just had to say, I can't. I'm not really allowed to recommend anyone, even down to password managers. I had to be really careful about how I word. I don't recommend password managers. I suggest password managers, but with heavy caveats, and people need to do their own research, obviously, to make sure they're happy. But yeah, the Southwest Cyber Resilience Centre, this really changed things for us because it's police-led, Home Office backed, and it's basically a partnership between public and private sector. So we've got I believe, a superintendent and inspector who are currently seconded to the Cyber Resilience Centre, and they've been charged with setting it up, getting it up and running, and it will eventually be a self-sustained, self-funded thing through memberships, subscriptions. So there's various different levels of subscription. You can go in at the free level, you get cyber awareness training, you get a bunch of different bits and pieces, basically, and newsletters, advice, guidance, and all that sort of stuff, right up to the top end of it, where there are sort of penetration testing services, web app testing, and all that sort of stuff. The best bit about it is, obviously, because there are approved partners and organisations who have been given the green light, vetted heavily and given it sort of the approval, the Cyber Resilience Centre are able to say, well, if you need this particular solution, here are a couple of businesses you could want to go speak to. So now the advice that we give of make sure you've got this, consider using this, there's now somewhere people can go to actually do that. It doesn't just go in, sort of percolate in someone's mind, and then, well, I don't know where to go, boom, and gone. It brings that sort of meaningful, tangible element to the advice that we give, which is great. Really hopeful that when things get up and running again, obviously the Cyber Resilience Centre will find its feet, or it is finding its feet, obviously, but it'll grow leaps and bounds. We'll be able to work together to make sure that people are safeguarded suitably. That is basically the gist of everything I wanted to talk about today. Like I said, I'm very mindful of the fact that you probably want to know some of the more nitty-gritty sort of stuff. Might be that my talk was a little bit less interesting, or significantly less interesting than Mantis's. However, if you do have any questions at all, feel free to chuck them over. I'll do my best to answer them. If I can't, if it's something that's a little bit too sensitive, something that might cost me my job, I'll try and answer it tactfully. I might have to decline, but I'll certainly do my best either way. So let me just close this window down, and I can stop sharing my screen. And there we go. Hopefully, I'm back in the room.
Thank you very much, Chris, for the very good presentation. Again, a virtual clap from everyone. Right, so there are some questions. I have one question as well. Let's see what people have written in the chat. So the first one is, which method of cyber profiling is performed if the subject is a foreigner?
So often, if something's overseas, that will give us quite a big issue a lot of the time. Often we'll take stuff and we'll go out to the regional cybercrime units and beyond, and it really comes down to proportionality of a great deal of stuff. So if it's something obvious like let's take Mantis's job for example, a huge sort of wide operation, now that's the sort of thing that's going to get attention, is really going to need that input, so that will go up through and up the sort of line. Often the problem will come down to jurisdiction and whether or not what's the word I'm looking for? If another nation isn't exactly friendly, isn't hostile, isn't cooperative, there can really be a bit of a dead end to an investigation. We have to have cooperation through other agencies abroad. So we see a great deal of crime from some of the places you probably expect it to come from. So let's say an operation run from Russia, probably not going to get cooperation there. In terms of the profiling, like I said, to be honest, any investigations we do in Dorset, they're typically Dorset based. Anything that we can really flesh out and run with, we normally have to have a local offender. We do look at packaging things up and making sure we escalate them. And that's the sort of stuff that Action Fraud and the NFIB will do. And the regional and national teams as well will usually take charge with stuff where we've got an offender who is based abroad. Usually that's going to be for your big jobs, so boiler room scams and things like that, crypto scams as well. We've had a couple of those actually. I think one last year, £23 million crypto scam that the Southwest region and our national team worked with Dutch police to unravel. So the work does go on. And it is effective, but yeah, foreign offenders does tend to make things quite a lot more tricky for us sometimes.
Right, thank you. You actually answered my question about the jurisdiction and how we tackle with crime when we are living in this global information village, and we don't have like a shoplifter which is near the road. He might be in another continent.
Yeah. We, like I said, we have really good relationships with a lot of again the agencies and organizations you'd probably think. So Southwest Regional Cybercrime Unit, for example, will deal directly with the FBI in some jobs, Dutch police in this particular one. So when we have cooperative countries and things like that, we have a great deal of success. And then we have mechanisms at our disposal where we can compel companies based abroad, for example, submit particular forms and paperwork and things like that. There are processes we have to go through to satisfy sort of conditions and criteria, but we are able to work quite well internationally with people as well, which is hopefully reassuring. So.
All right, thank you. This is an interesting one. Conviction rate for CMA crimes.
Above my pay grade, unfortunately. That's one that I couldn't honestly tell you what the conviction rate is, unfortunately. My job primarily is the sort of protect advice and all that sort of stuff. I don't deal directly in investigative stuff. I do a lot of our III, so our open source work, but when it comes to the conviction side of things, that's not my area of expertise, I'm afraid.
Thank you. What about the rate of, I mean, it's on the slide, on the stream, so have a look because it's a long one.
Yeah, be honest with you, overwhelming majority of what lands on our desks will be these bulk sort of scams, again, along the lines of the is this you sort of stuff. That makes the identification quite tricky. So we do a lot of the time when it's so your domestic side of things, that's usually fairly straightforward and fairly easy. The bulk of the work that comes our way will be the scams that are like let's think of an example. There's ones where you'll get an email or a Facebook message that says, I'm stuck somewhere, I need £100 to get home, or I forgot my niece's birthday, so can you send me £100 worth of £100 worth of iTunes vouchers? Those things, really high volume stuff. A lot of the time, obviously, as well, if it's something that's affecting a business, it's going to be some sort of malware or business email compromise. So again, that becomes tricky because when it's ransomware, obviously, normally you've just got that ransom note, and then a great deal of the other stuff is basically gone. Becomes quite tricky to investigate and get to the bottom of too. I've got to be really quite worried that I'm making it sound ineffective when in reality it is just, you know, some of the stuff that is coming our way. You know, you're never going to get to the bottom of, simply because it's huge volumes. It's miles and miles away, and the people that are doing it typically are quite good at covering their tracks. But yeah, when we've got a local offender, for example, say domestic related hackings, or just your sort of people grudges against other people, pretty good success rate with that sort of stuff. I couldn't put a number on the conviction rate or anything like that. Again, like I say, that's not my area, but I can assure you things like that we do quite well with.
Thank you. A couple more questions. So, no, there's one before that. Apologies. So, I mean, I would abstract this one, not about apprenticeship. How would someone who is studying in the UK, I mean, I'm assuming that Rajesh is also an international student. How can someone end up working with you guys? So, and combining with the next question, which is, what are the the skills that are needed?
Sure. So for me, I mean, it's probably not going to sound that impressive to you guys, obviously, because I imagine you're much more highly qualified. So when I came into the role, obviously, I had a little bit of knowledge around what we do and how policing works anyway, which has been really beneficial, because I know the sort of information we need and how to use it, basically. But everyone in my role we were basically afforded particular training packages, and we now have a one approved training provider across the country. I think it's QA, actually. There's one down in Bristol, London, all over the place. And they've got NPCC specific, so National Police Chief Council specific training packages. And they're all basically provided to everyone in our position to make sure we're all on a level playing field and everyone has the sort of skills and the knowledge that they need. I was fortunate when I came into my role, I was able to take took a course for a CompTIA Security Plus and the associated exam for that. And that was the sort of benchmark for people coming into this role. In terms of getting that for yourself, obviously it's widely available. I think what I tend to recommend to people, myself, when we get people ask about that sort of stuff, websites like cyberbury.it are a godsend, because you've got those pre-recorded presentations and training packages, which can get you to the point where you're probably not going to be exam ready by the end of it, but it gives you the base knowledge to go on and buy, Professor Messer's books, for example, the ones that are usually quite good. That's really how I got myself to the position that I am in. In terms of, I see there's one about a master's as well. I don't know. If anyone can tell me how to do that, I'd be keen to know myself, because I'm always looking to expand what I know and take up whatever sort of training opportunities I can myself. Unfortunately, through the police, there's not really a great deal available we can do in terms of signposting people towards opportunities. I know, obviously, locally we've got a really good university that do computer science, cybersecurity, and all that sort of stuff. But for apprenticeships and things, I'm afraid I probably wouldn't be able to tell you where to go for that sort of stuff.
And if I may add, since we are, an open source community, if you are interested, guys, to play with some tools, there is the Sleuth Kit that has a GUI version that I cannot remember now how it's called. And the actual author of the Sleuth Kit, I can't remember the name of the new product, offers free training. There are many videos about how to conduct investigations and case management with this tool, basically.
Is it autopsy you're thinking of?
Sorry?
Is it autopsy you're thinking of?
Autopsy, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the next one, volume of offshore scam calls.
There's one before that, I think there's.
Sorry?
There's another one before that. There's smishing.
Oh, yes, I'm missing charts. Okay,
I did see that one. Yeah. The simple answer on that one is, again, we don't get those statistics at a local level, unfortunately. We recommend people do it, obviously, for obvious reasons, but in terms of its effectiveness, I haven't got any figures or access to the figures to be able to tell you, I'm afraid.
And now coming back to this one.
Yeah, basically, there's been a huge amount, whether or not it's specifically COVID related. not really sure. But a big uptick in scams in general, because obviously people are at home, people are bored, people are on their computers, people are remote working, loads of stuff like that has really fueled the fire a little bit. So obviously those stats I showed you at the beginning of the presentation that reflect the period up to March 2020, really expect next year's ones to be significantly higher, because obviously that cut off just before obviously national lockdown and things. A lot of scams, we've had an awful lot of them come through that are sort of COVID specific. Things around PPE. So bogus sales of PPE was one of the big ones. People going to websites and finding out that they've just paid for something that doesn't exist. Things like one of the more interesting ones are people sending out links to a COVID infection tracker map. So you click on this thing and it will show you who of the sort of concentrations of COVID infections in your area. Completely fake, obviously. It's something that takes you off down a rabbit hole of probable malware, basically. I think that one was a ransomware infection specifically designed for Android handsets. The case that we had come through in our office, or the case we were made aware of, at least in our office. Telephone calls. Obviously, we've had a big sort of surge in those engineer scams. The ones where it's like I said a minute ago, BT calling because there's something wrong with your Wi-Fi, your bank calling because somebody's in your online account. Obviously, the sort of rise in those is almost certainly because of people being at home from people will be at home, so they're more easy to get hold of or more easy to target. COVID related stuff specifically, that was really effective at the start, and then people have just sort of gone back to the usual sort of scams and tricks that they've been using. The COVID ones are still there, but it's not the overarching theme of most of the scams anymore. So yes, basically, huge increase in some stuff coming through.
Thank you. I'm double checking that I'm not skipping any. So one from Deepthi. Hi, Deepthi. Help from academics.
So yeah, for cyber prevent and things like that, I mean, it's led regionally. So I'm the SPOC for Dorset, and we feed into a regional cybercrime unit who deal with the coordination with private sector and all that sort of stuff. If there's anything that obviously an organisation is able to do that would be useful, obviously, it'd be well worth getting in contact with the Southwest Regional Cybercrime Unit, because this whole process it's actually in the process, I think, of being reworked. A lot of the prevent stuff, so we're getting a new sort of process in place for referrals and determining who's going to be eligible for which particular channel and all that sort of stuff. Any information really, anything that we can do that might help as a diversionary tactic for somebody would be great. And obviously academia is probably one of those things that would be very useful indeed as a channel. Like I said, the administrative side of things is regional cybercrime unit. For me, it's primarily going to speak to people, find out what their capabilities are, see if they're going to be eligible for this sort of scheme and what we're going to be able to do with them down the line. If it's going to be a slap on the wrist and a cease and desist sort of thing, or if it's going to be a full-on intervention with potential for conviction, potential for apprenticeships or all that sort of stuff. But the big decisions on that are made at a regional level and above. And hopefully we'll have a bit more on that fairly soon. We're looking at getting a great deal more involvement at a local level in cyber prevent. So with any luck, in the next, say, year or so, there's going to be a big change and a lot more local involvement with local offenders and things like that.
Thank you. Another one. Yeah,
so we actually have a pretty thorough and robust open source training package in force already. It's the one that I went through myself actually a few years ago now, and obviously, as you probably all appreciate, when it comes to open source, it's a case of keeping on top of the skills and keeping them sharp. So yeah, we do have internal training. I do an element of that as well. A lot of what I do. So actually next week I've got some internal training, and one of the key things that we're going to be, I cover rather in that, is about digital footprints and the risk of exposure. And obviously the advice that we can give to people around making sure they're not blasting out too much information about themselves. I have a pretty good example with that in those presentations. And it just wasn't a in-force thing, but I use the example in my in-force talks. chap at one of the organizations I spoke to who was a Strava user, and he actually volunteered himself to be investigated as part of a sort of awareness session, so we could show his colleagues basically what information is there and how to find it. But he was blown away by how much you could get. And Strava, through you go through his Facebook, you find a picture of a bike. Well, he's probably a cyclist, so let's have a look. Find him on Google Strava. Bam, his account, and in there's all the maps for his rides. So I could tell you what time he left his front gate to go to work, what time he left the pub on his way back from work, and which gate he went back into his house on. All the detail of his commute, because it was more or less the same every day. So yeah, that's what I tend to try and use it for. That information would be more about preventative stuff, making sure officers aren't giving away anything. And again, we use that information or those examples in our external talks too, because ultimately, any information you make public can probably be used against you in one way or another. So yes, in short, I do get involved in some of that stuff. The actual giving of the open source training isn't me. We've got colleagues that deal with that in our learning and development unit, but we do have provision in force. Yeah.
Thank you. One more.
That can be a tricky one. So for us, we look at whatever comes to our desks in our office. We have a key performance indicator that we have to hit, which is 100% of jobs that come our way have to have a definitive investigation. 100% of jobs have to be given suitable safeguarding advice, and if we don't hit that target, obviously we're held to account for it. That would have been a decision probably made if it was in the UK. It would have been made at action fraud level, where they do a great deal of triage and looking into things. It may well be that in their sort of initial investigation side of things, they weren't able to determine whether or not there was ever going to be a conclusion. Truth be told, and to be perfectly honest with you, I couldn't really answer that question, simply because if it came our way, it would have been investigated. You would have had some sort of contact and some sort of feedback. A decision would have been made elsewhere, and the reasons for that, obviously, it wouldn't really be fair for me to comment on, because I simply don't know what it would be, I'm afraid.
Thank you. So I don't see any further questions. Let's add Mantas to the stream if there are any last questions for him. And unless there is something else that comes to the chat, we can call it a night. Thank you both for the excellent presentations.
Yeah, just to echo what Alex said, thank you very much for presenting. It's been a good evening.
Another one, let's see. What do you mean approach the police to learn about forensics on field? Anyway, I will leave Chris, maybe he has some ideas.
Yeah. It depends, I suppose. If we're talking digital forensics, that's something we typically keep quite a tight lid on, for obvious reasons. And then sort of conventional forensics, I don't really know. I mean, if you are sort of UK based, obviously dropping an email into the force to ask a question is probably the best way to go about it. I don't touch forensics, thankfully. It's not my not anything to do with my role, and it's a lot more involved than I typically like to be with some stuff. But well worth asking a question. Anything, if anyone does have any questions about specifics of how the force operates in Dorset, there's always the inquiries inbox, which goes straight into our control room, and they're usually really good at making sure questions get passed to the relevant people. And then obviously if people are able to help, they will do so. But yeah, I couldn't really give a much more robust answer than that, unfortunately.
If I may add, if the question was about digital forensics, then I would suggest, at least go and search about open source solutions. There are open source solutions for smartphones. There is, we mentioned autopsy earlier, and there is a lot of material for autopsy, autopsy. So it's a pretty mature area, digital forensics, and there is a lot of resources that you can go about and find.
I think that's a wrap, isn't it?
All right. So thank you for being here with us today. And we hope that the next one, I have been saying that the last 3 times, will be in-person meetup. Yeah. So again, Mandas and Chris, thank you very much for being here today, and have a nice night. Good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Thank you,
Have a
everybody.
good-